go. Here's our agenda for today. So we've got an action-packed agenda with a lot of information to cover. We're going to talk about donor advised funds as the Swiss Army knife of charitable giving. I used to travel when I was at the Naval Academy with a boss who always had a Swiss Army knife on him. And I became enamored with it as the tool for doing everything. What it is not good for is traveling through airports. We're going to talk about how to maximize the tax advantages of a donor advised fund under the current tax laws. We're going to discuss planning for family philanthropy or even for your own individual philanthropy using a DAF. I want to be clear that when we talk about family here at the Arlington Community Foundation, we're often talking about just people who are in our orbit, close in our, who are connected to our purposeful life. And so family, we interpret it very broadly. And then we'll dive into planning for beyond your lifetime, your charitable legacy, and how that can reflect your values and your vision for the world that you'd like to see. And we'll also offer plenty of time for your questions. So I know many of you joined us today because you have a donor advised fund and you are seeking to really leverage the benefits of this tool for your philanthropy. Others of you are joining us from nonprofit organizations where you are working with donors who are supporting your mission through their donor advised funds. Some of you are here because you are interested in learning more about donor advised funds. So we want to make sure that everyone's on the same baseline of understanding this tool. At the macro level, donor advised fund grant making represents about 10% of the total giving in our country. So in 2024, total giving was over 550 million, and 10% of that, billion, and there was over 54 billion in grants from donor advised funds. Currently, there are about $250 billion in donor advised fund assets. So this giving is really a vital part of the steady source of support for our nonprofit organizations. That we find that this support through donor advised funds is consistent and a very resilient source available for our nonprofits when times are difficult. So how does it work? It's pretty simple. You execute a fund agreement, make a gift into the fund of either cash or other assets. And we'll talk a little bit later about gifts of non-cash assets into donor advised funds. You secure a charitable income tax deduction at the time of the gift into the fund. And then you can recommend grants to qualified charitable organizations over time. And what people love about this tool is it's really easy to set up. There's very little administrative work in doing so. Whether you use the Community Foundation's platform or one of the many commercial providers, there's typically a very easy to use portal to go in, and you can view the past history of your giving. You can also log into a portal and make your grants. You have the opportunity to give anonymously if you're just learning about a nonprofit and you're not quite ready to be known to them, or maybe you prefer to be anonymous all the time in your giving. So it's a very easy way to maintain your privacy if that's something that is important to you. And then there's this phenomenal opportunity to tap into the services offered by a donor advised fund sponsor. And of course, we have a bias here at Arlington Community Foundation. We like Community Foundation donor advised funds because we have a commitment to diving deep with our fund holders to help them understand the issues that they're most concerned about, the landscape of the nonprofit organizations that are addressing those issues, looking at how to evaluate the impact of those organizations, and really putting together a plan for impact that offers the donor an opportunity to see what they're accomplishing and then make decisions moving forward about how to prioritize their giving. And finally, with every single donor advised fund, there's an opportunity for legacy planning. to use that fund to be the charitable recipient of a portion of your estate. Couple things to keep in mind related to donor advised funds. You may not use a DAF to fulfill a binding pledge. So that's where a donor has signed a binding pledge agreement. You can, however, make a multi-year commitment to a nonprofit organization through your donor advised fund by scheduling recurring payments to occur over time to that organization. You just can't execute a binding pledge. You can have a letter of understanding with the nonprofit, and again, can set that up in order to
Christy,
automatically
Christy, can
pay
you
out.
kind of explain what a binding pledge is then? It seems that it's kind of what you described for DAFs.
So a binding pledge is when you might execute an agreement with your say with your university. You're setting up a scholarship at your university, and you signed a pledge agreement, and it is going to be binding on you and your estate if you don't pay it out within the terms outlined in that agreement. So it really has to do with the language that's in the pledge.
And it being legally enforceable,
Legally
like they could take
enforceable.
you to court for it if you didn't fulfill it.
Right.
Makes it easier, thanks.
And then donor advised fund grants cannot pay for charity sponsored events where there's a personal benefit provided. And so it could be the gala dinners, or we encounter a lot of folks who are interested in making gifts to their university's athletic association in exchange for getting really great seats at the football game. And that is not a permitted use of a donor advised fund grant. And finally, qualified charitable distributions from IRAs are not permitted into donor advised funds. And this is a tricky one because it seems like it would make life very easy for people who are at the age where they are required to take minimum distributions from their IRAs. The opportunity to make a qualified charitable distribution is fantastic. Just remove that amount from your taxable income. And unfortunately, instead of making one gift into a donor advised fund from that IRA and then making multiple grants from your donor advised fund, the way the tax law is today, you still have to make those individual qualified charitable distributions to nonprofits. Any questions about donor advised funds and how they work?
So what if you were to take your charitable contribution, your IRA, and put it with a bank, mix it all up with your other money, and then take that same amount and put it into your DAF? Could you do
Sure.
that?
Well, you would have to realize the required minimum or the amount of the distribution that you take into your income. So you'd have
Gotcha.
to pay income tax on that. However, you would receive, a charitable income tax deduction that could, offset that. So that's really where you have to get your tax advisor involved, sort of evaluating the two strategies.
Thanks. That's good.
Okay. So things changed pretty dramatically with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018. So that's when the standard deduction nearly doubled, and state and local tax deductions were capped at $10,000. So the result of that is that the total number of itemizers in the US went from about 37 million down to 16 million. So now less than 10% of taxpayers are itemizing. And what do you think happened as a result of that? Well, charitable giving went down. Overall, participation by household in giving declined from about 2/3 of households were engaged in charitable giving, and now it's less than half. So now we have a brand new tax law on the books. Some of you wrote to me to ask, what is the OBBBA? It's the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And there are a few provisions in the new tax law that are very relevant for charitable giving. First, there is a new above-the-line deduction for charitable contributions starting in 2016. And that is $1,000 for individual filers, $2,000 for married couples filing jointly. Key thing to note, this above-the-line deduction is only for cash gifts, and it cannot be used for contributions into a donor advised fund. So no stock gifts would qualify, and you can't put the charitable gift into a DAF. Another key provision that could be of interest to folks, when we say SALT, that's the state and local tax deduction. It increased from a cap that was at $10,000 to $40,000. And we'll have some additional increases through 2029. So while we saw from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2018 a dramatic reduction in the number of itemizers, there will now be some more, an increase in the itemizers. And we'll talk in a minute about why that's relevant in the context of charitable giving. Another provision, there's a new 5% charitable floor. So charitable contributions are only deductible to the extent that they exceed 5% of adjusted gross income. So if your income is
0.5, right, Christy?
0.5%,
Yeah.
yes. Sorry about that. If your adjusted gross income is $200,000 and you make a $10,000 gift, only $9,000 is deductible. And then finally, the deductibility of charitable contributions is going to be capped at 35% of adjusted gross income, even for those who are in the 37% tax bracket. So if you are in the this year, if you're in the 37% tax bracket and you contribute $10,000, your deduction would be worth about $3,700. Next year, because of that, because of the cap, that charitable deduction would only be at $3,500. So what are the strategies to consider? Bundling charitable gifts into a donor advised fund in a year when you choose to itemize. There's still many non-itemizers, and to select a year when it makes sense to itemize, perhaps in light of the fact that the SALT deduction cap is higher. We are in an area in the DMV with, where we have a lot of high income earners who may still be, who are likely to be itemizing and to be able to take advantage of that higher SALT cap. So there could be some good years for itemizing, putting all of a larger charitable gift into the donor advised fund, and then spreading out the grant making over time. We always encourage folks to consider gifts of non-cash assets. And why is that? Well, you have the opportunity to save capital gains. So if you're holding some NVIDIA stock or other highly appreciated stock in your portfolio, there's an opportunity to make a gift of that stock and to have an opportunity to achieve the charitable deduction and the capital gains tax savings. Many folks find that it's a good time to use giving of non-cash assets when they want to rebalance their portfolio or take advantage of contributing stock, and then that has the lowest basis, and then rebuying that stock in the portfolio at a higher basis to avoid capital gains but bite down the line. We've heard that referred to as the charitable swap. So that's where you give your lowest cost basis stock. And the key thing is with this new One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you really need to seek the advice of a trusted tax professional now. 2025, in 2025, we don't have the cap on deductibility. We don't have the 5% or the 0.5% limitation. So this is a year when you can really make the most of your charitable contributions. And it's a good year to contemplate whether it makes sense to itemize and then bundle your charitable gifts, putting a larger amount into the donor advised fund, and then making sure that you're providing that really consistent, resilient source of support for the nonprofits that you care about. So we've talked about, the tax efficiency of the donor advised fund, but this is really the fun part. How you can use your DAF to create a very meaningful plan for philanthropy that might include your family or those who are close to you. And these are some central tenets that are put together by the National Center for Family Philanthropy. And I think they really hold up as a good framework for thinking about a plan for charitable giving. And some essential elements of a plan would be accountability, really deciding on the front end. Who do you want to be accountable to yourself, to the people you're trying to help, and then really asking some questions about what impact you made through your giving. You might say, I want to advance educational opportunities for underserved youth. That's something that you care about personally, but really focusing on how to measure whether you are being effective in achieving that goal. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with tools like Charity Navigator, places where you can go and see all of the data about how an organization is performing. And some people really appreciate that and they like seeing the star rating. But another way of being accountable is taking the time to go visit an organization and meet the leadership and see for yourself whether you are making the impact that you desire to make. Another key tenet is equity. And this really begins with recognizing that individuals and communities have different lived experiences and identities. And sometimes the solution that we think will be the right one really isn't one that builds trust in that community and addresses the challenges in the way that would be most effective. And so asking ourselves the question, whose experience and perspectives could really help inform my charitable giving? And thinking about who are you including and who are you excluding as you think about those things. And of course, tied to that is reflection and learning. Philanthropy represents an amazing opportunity to learn together. And particularly when we think about this in a family context, different generations view charitable giving in different ways. And it can be a way to, listen and learn from each other, to really make our giving part of a learning journey, whether it's learning about your local community or learning about, something on the international stage. So this is an opportunity to really cultivate curiosity and learning and to use charitable giving to strengthen relationships and thinking about how do we work towards common goals that reflect our values while still supporting the fact that even people in the same family, as we all know, can have very different perspectives. So within that framework, I always like to think of those as sort of guiding principles. But to look at, well, tactically, what do we do? How do we implement a plan for philanthropy? And I want to share some practices that Jen and I have seen that work pretty consistently with individuals and families. And one is storytelling. Some of you may have seen yesterday, we posted an oral history of one of our legacy planning clients, Roz Ridgway. And through that audio file, you can hear Roz's personal history of her distinguished career in foreign service and as she met her husband and the very egalitarian relationship that they had. And telling those stories within families and within the context of a community help us all feel more deeply connected to one another. Identifying shared values. And there are a lot of different ways to go about this. Jen and I work with a set of tools that can create a facilitated exercise for individuals and families that really want to hone in on core values and understand, where within a family people may have those similar values, and then where they, may be more independent in their thinking. And then creating a mission statement, or sometimes I like to think of this more in terms of creating a statement of purpose. I'll share a couple of examples. And this is a foundation that's been serving a family that's been serving in the local community over time. Their mission is to support underserved communities in Arlington by addressing gaps and opportunities, reducing barriers to economic mobility, and supporting health, mental health, and access to educational programming to foster a resilient community and improve the quality of life. So these folks have been at this for a while, over multiple generations, and that's a pretty robust statement of purpose. We also see some very simplistic but targeted mission statements. So consider this example. To provide support for animal welfare and the protection, preservation, and revitalization of natural habitats. And by having that kind of mission statement, it's very clear as you're evaluating opportunities for giving, what falls within that mission and what lies outside of it. And to prioritize those things that are part of the mission or purpose statement that you develop. Doesn't mean that you don't have a portion of your charitable giving budget for causes that fall outside of that mission. We all have friends and neighbors and colleagues who ask us to support causes that they're involved in. And we found that it's very effective to have your mission statement, but then to create a separate pool for when you want to be responsive to people who are important to you. Regular family meetings. It's very easy for us all to think we're on the same page, but in practice, if we're not communicating regularly, it's pretty easy to not be. And we found that the families that stay connected and meet regularly to learn together and to ask hard questions and to have difficult conversations. And finally, we think any good plan for philanthropy includes celebrating and participating in the civic circle. Some of you may have seen this before. It's put out by the Points of Light Foundation. And we really want to expand the aperture of thinking about philanthropy and impact. Because yes, giving is a part of it, but there are a lot of other pieces that are tied to making an impact. So it could be volunteering, and it could be, using your purchasing power to make sure that you are supporting the, values and causes that you care about, using your voice and advocacy, making sure that you're learning about the issues that matter to you. And so we like to use this particular graphic, and our friends at the Leadership Center here in Arlington use it as well, just to show the breadth of what civic engagement looks like and how they all of these pieces of the civic circle work together. And that's how you really achieve impact, by activating in different ways, and it deepens the connection to the organizations and causes that you care about. So I wanted to open the floor for any questions before we transition to the next part of the webinar, where we focus in on the legacy planning.
No questions?
No questions?
Okay. Great.
All right. Turn it over to Jen.
Thanks, Christy. So picking up on the theme of the whole webinar, which is really how to make the most out of your donor advised fund, it's important to remember that the how your fund is used in the future is another piece and another opportunity for impact. So especially at a community foundation where we have a lot of flexibility in how we would implement your plan, you can really think of this as a spectrum. On the one end, you can do something that's very targeted, which is picking somebody, a person, a group of people to act as advisors on the fund, just sort of transferring your ownership of that fund to another person. And then there's something that's sort of one step more inclusive of your own goals for that, and that's appointing successor advisors, but providing them with some instructions. Maybe that's, to Christy's point, that mission statement that you have that you want them to continue. Maybe you want the community foundation to provide them with some options that are inclusive of things that you would have done during your lifetime. But this is sort of a hybrid where the community foundation is included in sort of monitoring that your plan that you put in place is administered appropriately by people whom you trust. And then on the other end of that spectrum is leaving a letter of instruction with the community foundation that allows the community foundation to continue honoring what it is that you'd like to accomplish even after you're gone. And really at a community foundation, I would say the options are more flexible for that. So if you have a donor advised fund with a commercial provider, you can see what opportunities there are for succession planning for that fund. But even if your fund is not at the community foundation, the succession plan can still be the community foundation, even for your commercial donor advised fund. And so that's sort of a seamless transition between you administering your donor advised fund during your lifetime and you identifying sort of in an iterative way what your impact will be, and then creating a plan for what that impact will be going forward and for how long that will last. For successor, next slide, Christy. For successor advisors, you can identify for successor advisors what the rules will be for their administration of your fund. So you can give them the full flexibility to spend it out how they see fit, or you can have it be something that you want to last in perpetuity, and we can put it on what's called the spending policy for the community foundation. And that's something our board of directors reviews and identifies and sets a percentage that can be spent that will still have a great chance of that fund lasting in perpetuity. So that would give, let's say on a $100,000 fund, that might be, if it's a 5% spending policy, that might be that your successor advisor has $5,000 to spend this year. And if you have multiple successor advisors, that's another area of opportunity for some clarification from you as the donor. And that's, does each successor have independent agency to act on behalf of the fund and make recommendations, or do they have any restrictions? Do they need to be unanimous in their decision? And these are all things that we discuss with you as a donor to make sure that you understand the implications of different options that are available to you. The idea of creating a legacy plan can sound a little bit sort of grandiose or intimidating, and but there's a number of reasons why it's both helpful for the community, for you, and also why it can sort of be self-directed and be as in depth or as simple as you prefer it to be. So we think of it as more than just, here's a laundry list of things that we want money to go to, but more that we're, as the community resource in Arlington, that we're part of creating a communal history. So we often ask folks why certain causes or organizations are important to them. We know that that things will change over time. I mean, the amount of change that our country has gone through with a pandemic and so many other things, we know that that we'll need some durability. And so this roadmap gives people something to both be a touchstone to the past and what we as donors were interested in having happen, and then give them something to springboard off of as they continue to create something that is helpful to the community. A typical legacy plan would be some work on your own if you'd like. So we have workbooks and other opportunities for you to do things in longhand or through a web-based platform. We do meetings. So some people prefer to do a little bit of writing and then a discernment meeting with Christy or I or someone on our team to really talk through any questions you have or things that you're thinking about. And then ultimately it culminates in a written plan. And that opportunity for discernment, I think, is something that is very distinct to community foundations. Unless you're an ultra high net worth person, you may not get that at a Schwab or a Fidelity. But those discernment meetings really give you the opportunity to say, okay, these are some things, and I'm looking to write that to both my values and what I hope to have as impact in the future. And we can help that process go from something that feels very large to something that can get to a very concrete plan. So what comes out of this process is really a letter of instruction that is in place here at the Community Foundation. We will follow that letter of instruction to make sure that your intent is honored. And then when we identify how the funds will be dispersed, we can go from very broad to very narrow. So Christy, let's do the next slide. So when we get to the point of creating the legacy plan, there's a couple things to note. One is that this is also a place where there's a spectrum. So it can go from something very small and specific, like we want a certain amount or certain percentage to go right off the top to particular charities of interest to us. So we see this a lot with folks who want to take advantage of the opportunity to have this plan replace other things that might have previously existed in their estate plan. So you might currently have a will or a trust that indicates that you want $10,000 to go to 4 or 5 different organizations. By pulling that into the plan that you would have at the Community Foundation, you have the opportunity in your estate plan to just list Arlington Community Foundation as the recipient of any charitable giving through your estate. When that comes into the Community Foundation, then we can do your donations off the top. We can create, so that's sort of the far end of the spectrum, just those direct distributions that we often think of as that traditional bequest that we've seen over a long period of time. And then kind of moving across the spectrum, you can designate an organization to receive that spendable amount each year. So if you were to say, hey, my church really needs that $5,000 a year that I've been giving to my church, I'm really worried about what's going to happen. And I'm worried that a one-time gift of even $100,000 isn't going to be as helpful to them over the long term as something that creates some replicability in my annual giving that I've been doing to them. So maybe you set up a designated fund for that particular organization. Instead of that one-time gift, it becomes an endowed fund for that organization. That's something that they can count on year over year. This can be especially important or helpful to you if you're concerned about an organization's long-term viability, or you're concerned that a one-time larger gift will be a difficult and sort of burdensome thing for them to deal with as an organization or a board, and that they might do better with that consistent annual amount of money. That also gives you the opportunity to direct it to something that's very specific that we'll monitor over time. So if that organization runs an after-school program that you're really fond of, it can say it's designated to this organization for the after-school program. And so that gives you some opportunity to be a little bit more targeted than you'd be assured of if you did a sort of a one-time distribution where sometimes the information over time might be lost by the organization. Moving up the spectrum, you can add in things that are field of interest. You can add on things that are for a particular population, geography, and then obviously the kind of most flexible you can leave for the community is really a named gift to the community fund, which allows for an organization like the Community Foundation to look across over time and say there are things popping up that we might not have known about before, and now those are bigger issues in our community, and we need to have some money to move at those flexibility. And the next example I'm going to introduce you to is Karen Owens, and she opted for this. So I want to introduce you to a super cool lady, Karen Owens, no relation. Karen and I started working together with Christy in 2021 through her through her estate planning attorney. And when we first met Karen, we learned a number of things about her. When she passed away a few years ago, she was 68 years old. She came from a really large family. She sang in her youth choir at her church when she was a child growing up in North Carolina. She graduated with honors. By all accounts, she was an amazing student. And when she graduated from college in the late 70s, she moved to Fairfax to become a speech therapist. Eventually, after she had been a speech therapist for a while, I think it's attributed sort of to her ever-evolving curiosity and interest. She decided to switch gears and became an insurance agent and an investment counselor. After a few years of that, not to be deterred from setting off on a new course, she was able to achieve her real estate license, and she sold new homes for a builder for a number of years after that. And so she really had this this long career that had a lot of different aspects to it. She really liked to travel, as you can see here. I don't think that picture was taken here in the Northern Virginia area, if I'm not mistaken. And she was self-taught on the guitar. And then you might be saying to yourself, okay, these are all things you can read in someone's obituary. What is it that, what does this sort of have to do with her plan? And what we know, if you move to the next slide, Christy, is that through the process, that process of meeting with her and doing those discernments, we identified a number of things about her. And so you can see here, they really boil down to an interest in supporting disaster relief, the performing arts. She was a cyclist, and that inspired her to have an interest in the environment and environmental issues. She was always drawn, as many people are when we do these, to health and disease related causes that were impacting your own family. She was really interested in the support of women, especially tangible things that they would need in their day-to-day life to support their families, and LGBTQ human rights. And at the point she passed away, I guess she probably didn't even realize, and that's the value of legacy planning, how important that focus would be as time went on. So every year, and you can move to the next one, Christy. Every year, what this plan boils down to is that Karen created the Karen Owens Legacy Fund, and that's a field of interest fund. And it really marries both ends of the spectrum that we were talking about at the beginning. Every year, the first 20%, so a fifth of the amount of money that's available every year will go to the Human Rights Campaign to support equality and empowerment in the LGBTQ community. That was really important to her. And she left it a little bit, broad there. It's the Human Rights Campaign, as long as that's a part of their mission and something that they continue doing. There is the opportunity for the Community Foundation then, if something happens with the Human Rights Campaign, to be able to direct that in a different way. And then 80% is to support those issues that I mentioned before. So she's left it to the Community Foundation to decide in each year which of those areas are most in need. Disaster relief, environment, health, women's issues. So that really gives the board of the Community Foundation the opportunity to listen to what's going on in the community and identify where those monies will go. Next up. So similar to what Christy had said earlier about sort of that creating your mission and sticking to it, creating a legacy plan really gives us the opportunity to not only extend and document your interest during your lifetime, but to create an opportunity for impact to continue. So how do you think about what's been important to you during your lifetime and the way that the assets that you have at the end of your life could accelerate or add to your opportunities for both size and scale and impact in those areas. being remembered. You know, we just spent a few minutes talking about Karen Owens. I think it's really important for communities to listen to the people and the interests that came before us and recognize that those people invested in us as a community and want to keep that going. And so helping people to be remembered is an important part of this, because this is a community, I think, especially where people have done really interesting and amazing things, and their connection to the why of what they're interested in is really can be very bolstering to the next generation and keep that cycle of giving going. It gives you an opportunity to engage your family. Karen shared her plan, you know, we shared it posthumously with her family, and that gave them an opportunity to really feel like they knew her even a little bit better, and engaged them in a better understanding of what it was that she cared about. And then, you know, just that idea of giving back. I think we all want the happiness that comes from being able to be a source of support in our communities. We love that during our lifetime, and to think about extending that impact and potentially increasing it through the additional assets that might become available that we wouldn't have felt comfortable giving during our lifetime, but now become available for charitable giving is a real major opportunity for us as individuals to really get that satisfaction from the things that we've made over our lifetime. So we would love to open it up to any, you know, thoughts, questions, opportunities for you all to share anything that would be helpful as add-ons to what we've talked about. Christy, did I miss anything that we should mention?
Well, one thing that I would point out, and you touched on this, but you know, Karen passed rather unexpectedly, and she had not had an opportunity to talk with her family about her plan. And, you know, if this had just been a list of organizations by percentage in her will or living trust, I don't know that her nieces and many nieces and nephews with whom she was very close would have felt great about it. But when they read her plan, and even in
I love you.
even in the you know, written responses, they could hear her voice and connect with her in that. And what's beautiful about this is that there's this sort of seamless journey from opening a donor advised fund and becoming more intentional about giving, and learning as you go, and then incorporating that learning and perspective into that ultimate legacy plan. And so we have people who come to us at various points along that journey. We have young couples that come to, you know, to open donor advised funds. We had one that used it. They opened a fund, and they asked for their wedding gifts into into their donor advised fund. So you know, we meet people where they are, and some people come to us at the point where they're, you know, working with their estate planning lawyer, and they don't have a donor advised fund. But then in talking about the legacy aspect, they think, oh, well, we could get this started now. And so we meet people where they are, and help them along this journey. It's not knowing how to do this. You know, people, it's one of the things that people think should be obvious, or they think they should just know. But if you haven't been in the practice of being intentional and thinking and reflecting about giving and assessing the impact of your giving, it's not something that's natural. It is something to learn and work on over time.
Yep. Bernie?
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. So I had a question that I was going to ask my attorney the next time we refreshed our will. And on the topic of donor advised funds, is it possible to move money into a donor advised fund after after the account holder or account holders are deceased and are no longer the primary advisors, or do you have to liquidate the fund after a certain period of time? The basis of my question is I'm thinking, typically we only update our wells every 10, 15 years or so, and you may find a new charity that you like with the rest of your estate outside of your donor advised fund that you might want to move into that to grant to that charity instead of having to do a new will refresh.
Right. Well, and that's really the benefit of having a legacy plan in place as the succession plan for your donor advised fund. It's, if your fund is at a Fidelity or a Vanguard, you may not be able to provide a lot of instructions that are as detailed as you would if it were here at the Arlington Community Foundation or really any community foundation around the country. But that's really what you're getting for it is that plan, your donor advised fund comes to this plan. It's the same EIN, it's the same, entity that has your donor advised fund or that is the successor for your donor advised fund. So if your donor advised fund is at Vanguard, you can say, I want it to go to the Arlington Community Foundation, and then the plan on file with the community foundation can be amended without ever reviewing any of your beneficiary designations or your will or trust. You're just naming the community foundation and saying per my legacy plan. And then that plan can be changed. People can be removed, added, rules can be changed. And we've seen a lot of change over time. We've had donors that had certain restrictions and said, oh, geez, now I don't want that restriction on anymore because, if I originally wanted my college not to have, the flexibility to do certain things, now that their college is under fire, they're saying, never mind, I want the college to have the maximum flexibility to do what they want. So all of those changes can be incorporated into the letter of instruction that's for your donor advised fund. And if your donor advised fund is somewhere else and they don't offer that flexibility, you can have the recipient or beneficiary from your donor advised fund go to the community foundation for your legacy plan. So whether your donor advised fund is here during your lifetime or not, the same flexibility and opportunity is there. And we do refresh with people every 2 years. We reach out and say, hey, is this still good? And it doesn't require you going back to your attorney. All of this is, done for free. We don't charge for any of this planning work or anything like that. So it gives you that opportunity.
Okay. So yeah, that's good to know. And yeah, I sort of needed to short circuit my thinking. I was making it a little more complicated. I see your point. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions?
Jennifer?
Hi, thanks. So I'm here today actually wearing two hats. Our family has a donor advisor fund, so I've gotten lots of good ideas. We're going to be having a Thanksgiving meeting, call to action when my girls get home. And then, but also, hearing it from the viewpoint of being director of a nonprofit. And tell me if this is not the appropriate time to ask this question. I totally understand. But when you are working with people, creating donor advisor funds, are you, well, two questions. Do you have to have an agency fund for you all to let them know about you, or is it nonprofit catalog or anything? Okay. All right. That's what I needed to know.
But it's great. I mean, if your organization is not in the nonprofit directory, for sure, that's a great tool that we often will encourage people to check out. So many people come to us, especially on the legacy planning side. It might be more common in a place like Arlington to have been a very modest giver during your lifetime because this is an expensive place to live. A lot of your assets in this community might be tied up in a home that's been, has appreciated over time. And so we do see people who are looking at what they gave during their lifetime as a very small amount compared to what their estate plan is going to be covering. And so that is something that we can help people think through. What more would you do for the organizations that you currently give maybe $500 a year to when the amounts are much greater? And so that gives us the opportunity to explore with them, what have you given to and what areas of interest do you have? And then let's say, they don't, and we don't know every single organization doing everything. And that's why that opportunity to create a field of interest fund for you know, literacy or education or animal welfare, whatever those topics might be that people are interested in, gives us the chance over time to reach out to the community when those monies come in and say, hey, we have this much money available in this area. What's going on in literacy or animal welfare in the community, and get that in real time, because when people create their plan might be 20, 30 years before it comes to fruition. A lot can change in that time.
And one of the things, you know, speaking to you, Jennifer, in your role in running a nonprofit, it's really helpful for nonprofits to go through the exercise of thinking about how they would use a larger charitable bequest. And that's helpful for us to know.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
What is the plan? You know, if you were to receive, you know, $1 million tomorrow, what would you do with it? And even communicating, I mean, we welcome organizations to talk with us about their long-term planning. That helps inform us as we're, you know, working with legacy planning clients, to know that there's an eye towards sustainability and what that, you know, what that looks like at your organization.
And sustainability with legacy planning, I mean, honestly, I don't see another path to sustainability for nonprofits except maximizing the potential and the gifts of legacy gifts. I just don't see another way to create something that has the potential to weather, you know, changes in policy, federal grant making, you know, policy changes that impact the number of people you're expected to serve. I don't see how annual fundraising, with all of its ups and downs based on so many factors, can ever be something that you can, you know, have be a huge percentage of your budget. I think it's always going to have to be that you have some type of endowed assets or regular money coming in from a legacy plan. I just think that's the main way to create that sustainability within an organization. Other questions as we come on the hour?
Well, hopefully everyone had a chance to eat their lunch, relax a little bit, learn something new. We are eager to continue the conversation with all of you. Please reach out to us anytime with any questions that you have. We're really excited that you all joined us today, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.